Elias bought the house in Blackwood Creek because it was honest. It was an old Victorian with creaky bones, peeling wallpaper, and a price tag that suggested a dark history he chose to ignore. He wasn't alone, though. He had Cooper, a golden retriever whose only personality trait was an unwavering devotion to tennis balls and afternoon naps. For the first month, the house was a dream. But during the second month, the honesty of the house began to feel like a threat. It started on a Tuesday. Cooper, who usually slept at the foot of Elias's bed, didn't come when called. Elias found him in the guest bedroom, a room Elias hadn't touched yet. The dog wasn't sniffing the floor or chasing a rogue mouse. He was sitting perfectly still, his neck craned at an unnatural angle, staring intensely at the corner of the ceiling. "Cooper, come on, buddy." "Kitchen," Elias called. The dog didn't move. His low, guttural growl vibrated through the floorboards. The behavior escalated. Every night at exactly 3:14 a.m., Cooper would wake up, walk to that specific corner of the guest room, and bark. It wasn't his "there's a squirrel" bark, it was a frantic, terrified yelp, punctuated by whimpers. Elias checked for everything. Termites? Negative. Raccoons in the attic? He climbed up there with a flashlight, but the insulation was undisturbed, covered in a thick, even layer of dust that hadn't been stepped on in decades. Yet, the barking continued. Cooper stopped eating. He lost weight, his ribs beginning to show through his golden fur. He refused to leave that room, his eyes perpetually fixed on the junction where the crown molding met the plaster. "There's nothing there, Coop," Elias whispered one night, reaching out to pet him. Cooper flinched, the first time he had ever shown aggression toward his master. On the seventh night, the barking stopped. The silence was worse. Elias ran into the room, fearing the worst. He found Cooper cowering under a moth-eaten armchair. His eyes wide and bloodshot, staring at that same corner. Determined to end the madness, Elias grabbed a heavy-duty extension ladder and a hammer. "If there's a hive or a nest behind this plaster, I'm tearing it out," he muttered. He climbed. The air near the ceiling felt 10 degrees colder, smelling faintly of copper and wet wool. He took his screwdriver and began to scrape away the layers of old white paint. As the flakes fell, he noticed a small, perfectly circular hole. No larger than a dime, drilled into the wood of the molding. He angled his flashlight. The beam hit the hole, but the light didn't seem to bounce back. It was swallowed by a void. Elias pressed his eye to the opening. At first, he saw only darkness. Then, the darkness shifted. There was a wet, sliding sound, like a tongue moving over teeth. A pale, milky iris rolled into view from the other side. It wasn't a mouse. It wasn't a ghost. It was a human eye, bloodshot and frantic, staring directly back. Elias fell off the ladder, the thud echoing through the empty house. He scrambled backward, his heart hammering against his ribs. He realized then why the attic had been empty. The house had a double skin, a crawlspace barely 6 inches wide between the interior walls and the exterior frame. Someone wasn't living in the house, they were living inside the structure itself. He heard a sound from above. Scritch. 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 It was the sound of fingernails on the other side of the plaster, following his movement. He looked at Cooper. The dog wasn't looking at the hole anymore. He was looking at the door. The guest room door slowly creaked shut. The lock, which Elias had never used, clicked into place from the outside. Then, a voice, thin, raspy, and sounding like it hadn't been used in years, drifted down from the ceiling hole. "He's a good dog, Elias. But he's much too loud. Don't worry. I'll be quieter when I come down." The scratching began to move down the wall, toward the floorboard. The eye didn't blink. It didn't retreat. Instead, a muffled, rhythmic scratching began behind the plaster, not the sound of claws, but of fingernails dragging across wood. Elias didn't wait. He grabbed Cooper by the collar, dragging the trembling dog out of the room and slamming the door. He locked it, but the honesty of the house had already been stripped away. He called the police from the driveway, his eyes fixed on the guest room window. In the pale moonlight, he saw a slender, gray hand press against the glass, leave a smudge, and slowly slide back into the darkness. The result. When the authorities arrived and tore down the wall of the guest bedroom, they discovered a narrow, forgotten crawlspace, a blind room built into the original architecture of the 19th century house. They found a man, skeletal and mute, who had been living within the walls for years. He had survived by scavenging from the previous owners and, eventually, from Elias's kitchen during the dead of night. The circular hole in the molding wasn't for ventilation, it was a viewing port he had meticulously drilled to watch the house's inhabitants. Cooper hadn't been looking at a ghost. He had been smelling the rot and hearing the heartbeat of a living person just inches away, trapped in a space where no one was supposed to be. Elias sold the house a week later. He moved to a modern apartment with floor-to-ceiling glass and no crown molding. But even now, whenever Cooper tilts his head at a vent or a shadow, Elias feels that same icy chill, wondering if some walls are never truly empty.